Where is there a gap between how I show up now in the face of challenge, how I operate in my day, how I treat other people, how I talk about myself, and where is there a gap between what I'm doing now, how I'm thinking now, and this ideal version of my next evolution, the identity of my future self. In the last solo episode, we talked about how to know if you are ready for your next big expansion, the signs that will always accompany your next expansion and point you to the fact that you are ready to take that next step. And one of the biggest questions that I'll hear when I talk about this subject is, okay, well then what do I do next? So if you're feeling that same way, if you're wondering that same thing, I have got you. I'm going to share with you today the very simple daily practice that I do every single day as I'm in one of these up levels myself. How do I actually shift my identity to match the identity of my future self? What does that actually look like on a daily basis? I'm going to break it down for you, and I want you to take notes on this one. I want you to really write down some of these steps so that you can take some time afterward, do some journaling, and come up with your own answers and your version of this that's going to help you go from where you are now to where you want to be in the future. And often when you hear this topic of up-leveling or stepping into your higher self, you'll hear people say the fastest way to step into that next evolution is to up-level your identity to match. And that sounds good in theory, but if you're me, or if you're anything like me, the next question is, well, what does that look like? How does one up-level your identity? It's not really like I can go take a class on that. So a lot of the things that I do in my own daily practice are things that I've learned through other courses, other mentors. I love the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. He really talks a lot about habit change, and at its core, shifting your identity is essentially that. It's changing your habits of thought, your habits of belief, the things that you fundamentally believe about yourself or about the world, your habits of did I say action already? Thoughts, beliefs, and actions. Those are the three. And when we look at the combination of those three and the habits that run our daily life, the tricky thing about them is that they are, for the most part, not something that we're doing consciously. That's why they're habitual. They're things that we've been thinking or we've been believing or we've been doing for years, maybe even our whole lives. And so it takes a little bit of intention. It takes a little bit of consistency in order to rewire that pattern into something new. And ultimately, on the other side of rewiring some of these patterns is where your new identity lies. So when I think about what makes up an identity, it's those three things. It's the thoughts that I think, the actions that I do, and then underneath all of it are the beliefs and the thoughts that I think, because the beliefs are often the seed that gives way to the branches or the fruit, which is the actions and the thoughts. So you want to really look at it in that order. You want to look at, okay, what are some of the beliefs that maybe they worked for me in one season, but they don't really fit where I'm going next? Or what are some of the actions that maybe they've worked for me? They even created success up until this point, but now they can't necessarily come with me into this next phase, this next evolution. So we talked in the last solo episode about the signs and how to start digging underneath these signs that you're ready for your next evolution, and even start to think about, okay, well, what does this next evolution look like for me? What kind of an evolution is it? And when I take the time to get really quiet, oftentimes if my life is like too chaotic and too busy, I am not really getting accurate information about what I'm ready to shift. It's not until I'm out on a walk or sitting in a meditation or just sitting quietly, even sometimes just sitting in the car with no radio, no podcast, just complete silence, that I'll start to get these little pings of what I want to shift. And so for you, if you've been really tuning in, creating that time to get quiet and reflect and just noticing, where do you feel that call to shift something in your life? Then here's what I want you to do next. This is the daily practice that I use myself. This is something that I actually learned from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and part of how he teaches the process of change that has worked really, really well for me. And it's nothing, I always say it's not rocket science, but there is a science to it. And if you follow this and if you really look at how it fits into your life and these patterns that you want to shift, I do believe that over time you can see measurable results. But it is a daily practice, and it's one that the more consistent you are with it and the more self-awareness you bring, I think the more powerful it is. And yes, the faster you can actually start to experience results. So when I think about up-leveling my identity to match this future version of myself, the first question that I start with is, well, who is someone who really embodies this future vision that I want to step into? This is why having expanders and people who show you what's possible is so powerful. Because for me, at least, I do really well when I can see and experience an example. So even if it's reading books about, great people in history, or if it's someone that I can learn from directly or indirectly, the moment that I can observe certain behaviors in other people, it helps me to understand where there's room for a shift within my own life and my own behaviors. So the first thing you want to just write down is, who are the people, the expanders in your life, either from history or their current living people who have either done things that you want to do, or maybe they have a result that you want in a certain area of your life, your finances, your relationships, maybe it's in your parenting journey. You want to look for examples of people who have the results that you want that may be kind of a match with your next evolution. And then I want you to study them. And I want you to study not just the outward, what they do, their outward actions. Definitely study that if you're able to. But if you can, and if it's someone that you can either interview, or it's someone you can learn from or listen to their podcasts, read their books, I want you to start to study how they think and what they believe. Now, it's not always going to be stated obviously. But if you start to study behavior patterns and you start to study things like how do they show up in the face of a challenge, you can start to pick up on beliefs or habits of thought that show up for that person when they're faced with maybe a similar challenge that you're being faced with or you will be faced with. And you can observe how they respond. And then in the next part, we're going to talk about, then you need to notice, where is that different from how you currently respond? So the first step is who has results that you want and who embodies this future version of you, like who's just the living embodiment of the future you that you want to step into. Could be in the way they dress, the way they carry themselves, the things that they do and the work they do in the world. It could be something kind of intangible. It's just the energy that they embody. Whatever it is, I want you to start to write down and notice what are the things that you're really drawn to and what is that showing you is possible for yourself in the future. What do they do? Notice any habits. Okay, do they wake up at a certain time? Do they meditate? Do they pray? Are they a person of faith? Whatever it is, just write down what you notice about the way that they operate, the way that they think, anything that they believe, okay? So you want to look at who has what you want and what can you learn from them. Step 2, and this is the part that requires a lot of self-awareness and a lot of honesty, is to do an honest self-reflection and look for where your current beliefs, thoughts, habits don't match the beliefs, thoughts, habits that you think are probably going to be a piece of you stepping into this next evolution. We never know for sure. We're just trying to gather as much evidence as we can for, how would a person like that think? How would a person like that behave? And you want to start to look for, well, where is there a gap between how I show up now in the face of challenge, how I operate in my day, how I treat other people, how I talk about myself, and where is there a gap between what I'm doing now, how I'm thinking now, and this ideal version of my next evolution, the identity of my future self, that we've kind of pieced together by looking at all different types of examples of people who embody that version now. And you want to be really radically honest. It can sometimes be a little triggering, a little bit like shocking and jarring to realize the places where maybe we aren't showing up as our best. And if it's helpful, you can even just kind of keep this list near you throughout the day. And I want you just to tune in to when during the day you're feeling an energy and emotion, you're in a place that you just don't want to be in that mental state all the time. Maybe you're really doubting yourself, you're judging yourself or someone else, or you're gossiping. And you notice, I think the reason gossip and judgment don't feel great in the body, if you actually notice how they feel, is because at some level we know that that isn't true. We know that we all are filled with love and possibility, and we all have the capability to be great. So the moment that we're believing or saying or giving energy to something that's the opposite of that, it feels icky. At least it does in my spirit, in my body, when I am, whether it's I'm judging someone else or I'm judging myself, it feels off because it is off. It's not the truth. The truth is that you absolutely have the capability, the worthiness, you have everything you need in order to step into this new identity. So just notice where throughout the day are you showing up in contrast to this identity profile that we built out using kind of this ideal future identity that you want to step into. Some examples for me right now are I'm really committed to rewiring my beliefs around money. And I've done a lot of work on my beliefs around money, but I'm looking at little things where I might choose to entertain a lack mentality thought versus an abundant thought. So it might mean maybe something that I noticed in my ideal profile, future self version that I built out is that the way people talk about money in that version is in a way where there's always enough. And I always trust that there's enough and there's more coming, and I can source any abundance that I need for whatever it is that I want to do if I'm just willing to believe it and do the work and the action to do it. But maybe I realize that in my day-to-day life, I'm still saying things like, well, I can't afford that, or that's just too expensive. It's not that there's anything wrong with those phrases, but that doesn't mean that they're a match for the version that I'm committed to showing up as. I'm committed to rewiring beliefs and stepping into a new relationship with abundance way beyond money. And for me right now, these former ways of relating to money and relating to abundance don't fit in my future. So I just want to start to notice where there's a mismatch between the future identity that I'm stepping into and my current identity. Sometimes it's even past identity stuff that kind of rears its ugly head and tries to throw you off. So whatever that looks like, you just want to be really, really honest and look for where your current identity, actions, beliefs, habits don't align with where you want to go in the future. And it's really important to do this step and to put some awareness on the things that don't fit where you're going next, because once you're aware of them, you can choose something new. If we only want to focus on the future and we don't want to bring some honesty and awareness to, well, where does the current version of you not match up with that? Then you're less likely to have as much power in creating change. So don't be afraid of this. This is actually a really beautiful part of the process if you're willing to be super, super honest and really, really excited about finding areas for improvement and areas for change. So part 2, do an honest reflection. Where does your current identity not match up with your future identity? The third one, now you want to start to bring these two together. Your future identity, the examples you've pieced together, what you want to do is you want to start to look for, okay, where are the opportunities for improvement and now create a vision for the future identity. You kind of did that already in part 1, but now we're going to get it really concrete. Now that we can see, okay, here's what needs to shift. Okay, great. Now I'm going to start to actually write this into a commitment for myself. So I'm going to use the example about money again. If I have a commitment to reframing how I interact with money and how I speak about money, how I interact with my money. So what do I do when I log on to my bank account? Do I feel really unsteady and uneasy? Or do I log into my bank account with excitement because I'm so excited for the abundance that's flowing in and for what I get to do with it and who I get to impact? So you want to start to notice all these little opportunities throughout your day that you have the opportunity to reinforce the future identity that you're stepping into. And you want to start to put that in writing, what that's going to look like, feel like, sound like. And especially on a day-to-day basis, what I want you to do is at night, if you're reviewing your day and what you're going to do the next day, I want you to actually take the time to sit down and plan how you're going to go about that day and where are the opportunities to embody that new identity where you would have previously embodied your old identity. Okay. And so what you're doing is you're creating a vision of what this new identity is going to look like so that you know whether you're on track or not. So maybe that looks like you are going into a meeting and normally you'd be really nervous and you would kind of be doubting yourself and saying things in your mind that aren't necessarily that positive or that encouraging. And instead, you're going to close your eyes. You're going to visualize yourself taking 5 minutes to breathe deep in your car and repeat some encouraging, positive things to yourself before you walk in. I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go. You want to actually visualize what's the thing that you're going into the next day that you want to bring your new identity to. And what does that look like? Actually practice it. See it in your mind. This is such a powerful tool to start to really deepen your connection to these new pieces of your identity that you want to bring in. This is something that athletes have used for years, for decades, something that top performers use, just this practice of mental rehearsal. So you're going to do this the night before. Once you've kind of done your major brain dump, you've created this vision of your new identity. Now you want to start to bring it into your day-to-day life. So all that I do when I'm laying in bed, I'm kind of like relaxing my mind. You want to kind of be conscious of, does this energize your mind or is this something you can kind of do in a relaxed state? For me, I just, I'm laying in bed, I'm about to fall asleep. I'm kind of just in my mind going through what I have on my agenda that next day. And I'm looking for the places where I can bring this future version of me identity into it. Sometimes, and this just might be me and just a me thing, but I think it's really fun. I'll even just kind of like start to envision like, well, what am I wearing? Like, what's the outfit that's going to have me really embody this future self energy? And it's something that I use all the time, is using my style and fashion and how I'm presenting myself to tap into the energy of my future. So you can use that if that sounds fun for you. If not, I just want you to really hone in on, what are you experiencing? What are the emotions that you're feeling? How are you operating? Okay. And then you go throughout your day. Okay. So you do that practice of mental rehearsal. And then at the end of the day, so now you've gone through your first full day, you rehearsed it in your mind the night before, you're back in your bed. And before you rehearse the upcoming day, here's one final piece that I want you to practice. I just want you to take a moment and review how the previous day went. How did it go? Where did you find yourself falling into old patterns? And if there's any like really sticky points, like let's say you had a commitment to interacting in a more loving way with your partner, and something that they said throughout the day really triggered you, and you found yourself defaulting to an old way of communicating with them. And that was not, you felt it in that moment and you didn't clean it up, and you're kind of like beating yourself up, and some of that negative energy is carrying over into this evening, and it could even carry over into the next couple of days. What I want you to do is I want you to, as you're falling asleep, Just take a moment to review. Where were any of those sticking points during the day where your old identity, your old patterns were really present? And with so much love, I just want you to acknowledge, okay, I did the best I could today. Now, what would I do differently if I were presented with this same scenario again? And what you can do is you can use this practice of like mentally rehearsing your day to almost kind of do a redo of the previous day. And then anything you want to add with visualizing what's coming up in your day the following day. But for certain things like this, like certain people that are persistent people in our lives, and one of the things that you realize is going to have to shift in your identity is how you interact with these people, then you're going to have more and more and more opportunities to bring a new identity, a new way of being into those scenarios. So especially anything like that, what you want to do is you want to rehearse it, especially if it didn't go the way you wanted, and just you can tell it wasn't in the energy of this new identity you're creating. You want to take a moment at night, really go back, replay it in your mind, and do it in the way that your new identity, your future self-identity would. The more that you do this, now that you've created, and really this is something every time you want to uplevel your identity, you want to go back and create a new vision of what your future identity is like. How do they speak? How do they carry themselves? What are their thoughts, their actions? Look for examples. Then do an honest self-reflection. Where are the areas for improvement? Where's there a gap between your current self and your ideal future self? And then now take this into the practice of mentally rehearsing every single day and reviewing at the end of the day. If you could get into this habit on a daily basis, this alone will absolutely speed up the rate at which you can embody the identity of your future self. And therefore, it will speed up the rate at which your future self becomes your current identity and the rate at which you achieve those future goals. This is the key, but it's so simple that most people won't do it. Most people will not keep up with the pattern of doing this. And most people will overlook it because it seems too easy. But I promise you, this right here, this simple practice, repeated every single day, over and over again as you evolve your identity, is probably for most of us the missing piece to having and experiencing our future goals even faster. It's something I'm not perfect at. I do this every single day that I can remember to do it. And yes, there are days that I don't. But I don't worry so much about the days that I forget or the days that I fall off track. If I realize that I'm kind of getting disconnected from that future self, it probably means that I have not been consistent with doing this practice. And all there is to do is to pick back up and start doing it again. If you can't do it at night, it doesn't matter what time of day you do that mental rehearsal, as long as you do it. And the way to speed up and deepen this practice even more is to do it multiple times throughout the day. And there's one final thing that I just want to let you know is totally a part of this process. Don't be surprised if you are given multiple opportunities time and time again to practice this new identity. Don't be surprised if triggers show up or if the perfect opportunity for you to practice what your new commitment is shows itself. Because that ultimately, to me, how I choose to perceive that is that's just a sign that I'm really starting to grow and I'm starting to push the edges of my current identity. It's a sign that I'm actually getting an opportunity to practice who I say I am. So an example of this is when I was sharing earlier about this commitment to changing how I interact with money. I think what we want to happen is, okay, I make this commitment, I'm practicing these new thoughts and actions, and then poof, a check arrives out of the blue. And sometimes that stuff happens. Sometimes you get those little money miracles or those little God winks that kind of show you you're on the right path. But sometimes you get the perfect opportunity to practice who you say you are. So I was doing this work and I was really working on how I interacted and how I thought about money on a day-to-day basis in even just the little everyday little opportunities. And a few days in, I was not given a check. I was given a large, unexpected expense. And what started to happen is in that moment, I not only defaulted to like my old way of thinking about money, I went back like 2, 3, 4 versions into the past, like into pure fear. And it was only, a short while before I realized, oh, wait a minute. This is the exact moment that I have the opportunity to practice this new identity, this person who I say I am. Maybe this isn't a test after all. Maybe this is just my opportunity to reinforce these new thoughts, new behaviors right here in this moment. Because if I can't do it here in the midst of something that feels like a test, it feels like a challenge, then I don't actually own this new identity. Because when it's your identity, it doesn't actually even take effort for you to respond in this new way. So don't be surprised if as you start to shift some of these pieces of your identity, especially the ones that just have their grip on you and they're in there. They're patterns that you've had for decades. Don't be surprised if you are given opportunities. They might be disguised as tests, yes. They might be disguised as a challenge, but it's really an opportunity to practice this new identity and practice who you say you now are. And when you do, when you show up with this new identity in the face of this old challenge or old thing that might have thrown you off in the past, I feel like that's actually when we move forward even more quickly in cementing the new identity, is when we can bring our new identity to a problem that really would have rocked an old version of ourselves, and we choose something new. That is a perfectly normal part of the process. In fact, now when I'm doing this deeper identity shift work, I just expect it. I expect it. And I think when I bring that playful energy to it and I expect that those tests will come, but I also see them not as tests, but as opportunities to practice who I say I am, I anchor in my new identity even more. So I want to know, are you going to take this on? Are you really going to commit to this daily practice? If you want some accountability, you can tag me on Instagram. Show me how you're incorporating this little daily practice into your everyday life. Because when you do, I promise you, those of you that know, you are on the front porch, like you're right there about to knock on the door and open the door to your next evolution. This is like the password. If there were a secret password for this door, this is it. Practice who you say you are. Practice who you say you're becoming. Keep looking for expanders who are giving you these little clues to show you exactly what your next identity looks like. And the more you practice it, the more you rehearse it, the more you give yourself grace that you're not going to do it perfectly, the faster you will step into embodying that next identity of you.